Faith, the force that moves the impossible and reconfigures perspective. The discourse initiates with a critical inquiry. Is the perceived saturation of effort failing to resolve the prevailing challenge? A multitude engages in supplication and expectation, yet registers a non-response. Today's objective is the unveiling of the operational secret bequeathed by Jesus, the radical power of faith. We posit the hypothesis that the key to the translocation of the mountain, the current impossible constraint, resides not within human exertion, but within the most minimal quantum of belief. Scriptural records document numerous precedents: Noah's Ark, construction, Moses' Red Sea cleavage, substantiating that faith functions as the elemental catalyst that transforms petition into resolution, conflict into conquest, and distress into viable testimony. Mark 11:24 establishes the mandate for the believer to predetermine reception of the requested outcome during the act of prayer. The initial effect of the active deposition of faith is a fundamental paradigm shift in perspective. Faith serves as a cognitive enabler, permitting the apprehension of circumstances, irrespective of their perceived impossibility, through the divine lens. This instills an assurance of supervisory control, even amid systemic failure. The critical variable is not the magnitude of the faith, but its qualitative integrity and the ontological reliability of the entity in which it is deposited. For the cultivation of a robust spiritual trajectory, faith requires anchoring in persistent, rigorous prayer. Faith as a shield against fear and systemic doubt. The secondary consequence of engaging faith is its function as a robust protective construct against fear. Identified as a primary constraint that induces paralysis and inhibits action, faith serves as a constant reminder of co-location, that God maintains a presence throughout all engagements. This defensive function is exemplified across biblical narratives. David and Goliath, 1 Samuel 17:45. Despite overwhelming threat perception, David's unwavering faith in the God of hosts constituted his core protection, culminating in a successful outcome. The disciples in the storm, Mark 4:40. Jesus interrogated their apprehension, indicating that faith was the designated shield. Fear attempts to deviate the locus of faith, yet the presence of Christ aboard the vessel mitigates the turbulent state. Joshua 1-9. Upon assuming a high-stakes leadership mandate, Joshua received divine motivation to exhibit resilience and courage, predicated on the trust in God's co-accompanying pledge. Faith does not automatically nullify the human perception of fear, but provides the necessary fortitude to confront and proceed. Ephesians 6:16 designates faith as the critical shield that extinguishes all the flaming arrows of the adversary vectors of doubt, anxiety, and fear. The fortification of faith necessitates a daily regimen of constant communion with God, via prayer and the intake of Scripture, Romans 10:17, which results in the internal containment of the heart by divine peace. Faith, the key that accesses a supernatural domain, miracles. The third functional output of faith is the activation of the supernatural domain. Faith transcends mere theoretical assent. It is the access key to God's power for the execution of miracles that defy conventional human logic. Jesus consistently established a causal link between miraculous intervention and the recipient's faith. The woman with the hemorrhage, Mark 5:34. Her healing was directly attributed to the physical touch of his garment, affirmed by Jesus' statement, "Daughter, your faith has made you well." Bartimaeus, Mark 10:52. His persistent vocal petition and uncompromised faith served as the activation protocol for his healing miracle. Mountain translocation, Matthew 17:20. The criterion for the impossible is not the quantitative measure of faith, but its qualitative integrity and the power of the entity trusted. The case study of Peter walking on water, Matthew 14:28-31, demonstrates that faith enables the physically impossible, but the ingress of doubt and fear, the diversion of focus from Christ, leads to systemic failure. God remains the persistent agent of miracles, and his power is fully available to those who engage with sincere and fully directed faith. The dictum, "Everything is possible for one who believes," Mark 9:23 applies. Faith delivers not only physical provision but also emotional and spiritual miracles, such as the repair of relational damage and the transformation of the internal core. The paramount miracle is the spiritual reconfiguration achieved by submission to divine guidance. Faith as an element of structural consolidation amidst tribulation. The fourth function of faith is its capacity for structural maintenance during trials. The Christian trajectory inherently includes periods of adversity, yet faith supplies the requisite force for enduring crises, predicated on the certainty of God's control and the contribution of the event toward a greater overarching purpose. Trials possess an intrinsic design purpose, James 1:2-2-4. They generate perseverance and function as a refining crucible for spiritual maturation and integrity. Job 1:21. Following catastrophic loss, his faith remained uncompromised, declaring, "The Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised." His trust in God's integrity was subsequently rewarded with a duplication of blessings. Joseph, Genesis 52:20. Despite unjust enslavement and incarceration, Joseph sustained his faith, observing how God leveraged the malicious intent of his brothers for the ultimate benefit of many, culminating in his elevation to governorship. Faith provides a divine perspective on adverse circumstances. Paul, Romans 8:18. He maintained an eternalized view, assessing present suffering as negligible compared to future glory. The enhancement of faith during trials requires adherence to Scripture and prayer, Philippians 4:6-7, which generates a peace that is cognitively not. Trials expose human fragility, yet this is the precise locus where God's power is perfected to Corinthians 12:9, providing sustainment via His grace. Faith operates as the functional primary mechanism that actively links human limitation with the transformative capacity of the divine sphere. The analysis reveals that the active deposition of faith in God generates a fundamental cognitive paradigm shift, wherein the individual successfully transitions from a dependence on empirical evidence to an ontological reliance on an agent of absolute power. This activation yields 5 concrete outcomes. It reconfigures the perspective on adversity, establishes a protective shield against vectors of fear, thereby consolidating resilience, enables the channel for supernatural intervention, facilitating the alteration of physical reality, assures perseverance by recalibrating the trial as a structural consolidation process, and, critically, guarantees divine retribution across both temporal and eternal dimensions. The imperative for the viewer is unambiguous: to transcend the paradigm of self-governance and proceed to the conscious activation of their faith, regardless of its perceived magnitude, toward the single agent capable of omnipotence.